This evening's gathering specifically focuses on the importance of expanding the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, which has been crafted in accordance with the powerful model of the anti-apartheid movement with respect to South Africa.
It's not just the role of G4S in Palestine that's the issue. That is one of many, many issues that we're speaking about. And this is the perfect country to be mentioning it in, considering that G4S is a British company. Across the country, G4S is involved in the privatization of prisons, asylum housing, immigration detention centers, the police, welfare provision, and now they're calling into the NHS as well. And just to add insult to injury, we hear finally that they're also tax dodging on their taxes in this country.
The global campaign against G4S also reflects the globalized nature of capitalist violence. Activists are connecting the fact that G4S is the largest service provider to Israeli prisons to its responsibility for the deaths in custody of refugees such as Jimmy Mubenga, who was killed while being deported from the UK to Angola in October 2012.
To this day, the family has not gotten justice for what has happened to him, and none of us should rest, and none of us should stop the campaign until G4S is held accountable for what they did to Jimmy Mubenga.
This egregious treatment of undocumented immigrants from the US to the UK compels us to make connections with Palestinians who are transformed into immigrants, indeed into undocumented immigrants on their own land. And companies like G4S provide the technical means of carrying out this process.
When we say G4S is supplying equipment to Israel, it's actually supplying the surveillance equipment and the equipment, the glass that is keeping Palestinian prisoners from being able to touch, see, or feel their families. This is the role of G4S in breaking that collective action and breaking the spirit of Palestinian prisoners.
In Palestine, the prison issue today is not an issue that makes people ashamed. Everywhere we went, people were telling us about their incarcerations. There were special fellowships and scholarships set aside in the universities for those who had been incarcerated or whose families had incarcerations. When we asked people to stand in rooms and say if they themselves had been incarcerated or if someone in their families had been affected, people proudly stood because everyone understood in the Palestinian context that imprisonment was political.
The prison experience in Palestine is part and parcel of the apartheid nature of the Israeli state and not separate from Israel's history as a settler colonial state. As with all settler colonies, the prison system is established as a punishment for current resistance and a deterrent for any future forms of resistance.
G4S represents the growing insistence on what is called security under the neoliberal state. And of course, Gina presented a critique of that notion of security by suggesting that feminist alternatives may be helpful as we attempt to reconceptualize what security should mean.
The security also needs to be defined in terms of our ability to access our rights of citizenship, obviously, but it also needs to be determined in terms of our access to expressing ourselves in terms of gender and sexuality, and it also needs to be defined in terms of other aspects that are often hidden when we're talking about the problem of security. And so for us tonight to think critically about the security discourse, about G4S, to think about how the limitations, as we were hearing about earlier, of the approach to always invoking international law might be a way for us to begin to have a new dialogue that would, in fact, join us as feminists, as prison abolitionists, and as those who believe in a free Palestine in a new kind of conversation.
Just as we say, never again, with respect to the fascism that produced the Holocaust, we should also say never again with respect to apartheid in South Africa, in the southern US. But that means, first and foremost, that we will have to expand and deepen our solidarities with the people of Palestine, people of all genders and sexualities, people inside and outside prison walls, inside and outside the apartheid wall. Boycott G4S, support BDS, and finally, Palestine will be free.
Israeli government officials said the Palestinians will just forget. When Israel was first created, they said give them 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, and they will forget. I'm a 3rd generation Palestinian refugee. I have not forgotten, and I will go home. Thank you.